Happy Thursday. This is Charlotte K coming live to you guys with another Forever Friends podcast. How are you guys doing? Good to be on with you as per usual. Um, yeah, so hopefully you're having a good night. Maybe you're unwinding. And you can unwind with me. So let me introduce myself fully for those who might be new to the show. My name is Charlotte Cornegay. I am an author, a recording artist, creator of Interact Coaching and Forever Friends Academy. This is my show, Forever Friends Academy, where we talk about all relationship topics. And my aim is to help people weed out their lazy loving so they can experience love to their fullest capacity. All right, by introducing fundamental principles that you can ground pretty much every relationship dynamic you can think of, you can apply these principles to and cultivate long lasting love that lasts a lifetime. So that's what we do here in a nutshell. If you hear anything that you like, which I hope you do, definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel, Forever Friends Academy. Like, comment, and subscribe so that other people can hear this so necessary and so needed content, in my opinion. All right, so that's what I do when it comes to coaching. But as a performer on the stage, I go by Charlotte K. That's Charlotte with an S. Definitely Google or go to your favorite music platform of your choice and peruse my music. Hopefully you'll hear something that you like. As an artist, you can get basically the same thing that you get from me here, that I hope you get from me here, which is love and inspiration. I love writing anthems. There are a lot of songs that I have that if you are working out or setting out to do a new goal, or just having pursuing your passions and your purpose in life. I have songs like I Know You Wonder, Finish Line. There's so many. You Can't Burn Fire. All of those are some of my favorite songs, but also the feedback that I've gotten from people is, listening to those songs give them that type of feeling like they can continue on with their goals and things like that. And on the love end, I just hope to inspire people that real love and being able to experience true, genuine, authentic love is most definitely possible. So a lot of my love songs, I hope, inspires people in that way. So welcome. And we are going to get into tonight's topic. And I am going to start tonight's topic with the statement. We have been having a expansive conversation about a statement that I created for my group private coaching, Forever Academies. I have a subscription-based membership group where we meet monthly and we go over different relationship topics. So this is something that I introduced to them really at the tippity top of 2025. And I figured, let me present it to you guys, see if you would enjoy it in the way that they also enjoyed it. So the statement, I'm not going to say the full statement, but I will say it all the way up until the point where we are tonight. All right. So the statement goes like this. Some people hear, but don't listen. Some people listen, but don't understand. Some people understand, but don't accept. And where we are tonight, drum roll, da-da-da-da-da. That was a really weak drum roll. But where we are tonight is some people accept, but don't receive. All right? That is the statement for tonight. Some people accept, but don't receive. All right? That is the statement. I'm not going to call it a quote. And my question for you guys tonight is, first of all, what is the difference between accepting something and receiving something? That's what I'd like to dive into tonight. And then secondly, as per usual, what I've been doing is imagine if you're in a conversation with someone and they ask you that basically question, what is the difference between accepting and receiving? I'm in a relationship right now, dynamic, whether it's in a romantic sense or, honestly, I can definitely admit in the past, where I have been able to identify where it's been hard to receive, especially for those givers out there. Let me get for the people in the back, a woo. A yay or something for the givers out there. normatively, if you are a person who is used to giving, and giving some more, sometimes it's hard to receive, And I definitely have had that experience, and even in the now, I still have to kind of like Charlotte, just receive what's coming to you, and don't just kind of like really rest in it and sit in it, you know. So definitely, if you're a giver out there, you might have noticed that maybe you have some, a tendency maybe not to be able to really fully receive what people are giving to you, because you are so used to being on the other end. So if you're talking to someone who's struggling, maybe that's their struggle. What is the advice that you would give them? What would you say? Hey, Emily, how are you, love? All right, so let me repeat it again, guys, what the statement is for tonight. The statement is, some people accept but don't receive. And the question that I have for you guys tonight is, what is the difference? Somebody asked you, what is the difference between accepting something versus receiving something? What would you say to them? And if they were like, oh, I'm struggling with that, what would be the tips that you would offer them? You know, what would you say to them? So while I'm waiting to see if I get any of you guys to, chime in, what I will do is kind of recap what we have been talking about. Is some of the statements that we talked about in previous episodes, right? So some people hear, but they don't listen. And what we talked about on that podcast was that basically the difference between hearing and listening is, we all can, unless there is something you were born with, some impediment that it causes you not to be able to decipher, right, sounds and things like that. Outside of that, we all, we have our ears, we hear, we listen, we hear things, but we don't always listen in. We don't always, take a moment to really take a pause and tune in. And so the difference between that is basically being able to kind of not make the distractions of life, right, kind of make you dismiss certain things that do come to you, and it just kind of falls on your ears and then just like trickles away, right? And you're not really tuning in and taking a moment to really take in what it is that you are hearing. And so what I told the participants that night was that one of the ways that you can kind of cross the bridge from hearing into listening, and what will create a pathway for that is to hear with alertness, right? And that just means don't let the distractions and the noise of life drown out your ability to remain aware and remain alert, and really just wanting to seek the truth, and seek wisdom and direction, right? I always deem it like this on my show, that you don't want to ignore the loving nudges that God gives us to kind of like direct and navigate our life here. So that was the for the first statement, was hear with alertness, remain aware, don't let the routine of life become this kind of drudgery type of thing for you, so much that now it's like dampening your purpose, is deadening the things that would cause you, like the pursuit of your passions and your purpose, to hear with alertness and remain aware. And in the context of relationships, right, especially if you're in a marriage or a long-term relationship, hopefully, right, there's daily communication going on. And within that daily communication, sometimes we can, kind of dismiss and almost like where our partners are saying something to us, and we're just like, we're not even really taking into consideration what they're saying. Maybe we'll say, oh, you always say that, or even you feel like you can kind of end their statements or sum it up. We don't want to do that, right? We want to kind of, if we can, get into the positioning we were when we were getting to know that person, right? Hearing, hanging on to every word, and interested in really knowing who they are, because we're supposed to evolve, right? So if we give opportunity to kind of glean in and listen to them in that way. And one of the things that definitely helps me, that I just want to say again to anyone who's listening, If you can't get into the space of where you're like, oh yeah, I can get into space where I met my partner for the first time, and that's not real for you or realistic. What you can do is get into the reality that that person is not going to always be there, right? There is an end to everything that we experience here. And so if you can think on that truth, then holding and that them saying I love you, them saying I'm going out to take a drive or I'm going to work, we will take the time to pause and really, right, listen to what they're saying and honor their presence in our life, and that will help us to remain alert, right? The reality of it. That this, let's not take this for granted because this is not always. I literally just, my husband had give ordered a Lyft ride for me. Sometimes I substitute teach in my district when I have an opportunity. And he was using the car, so he lifted me home. And I met this beautiful, beautiful. Oh, actually, it wasn't even from work. I'm sorry, it was from the grocery store. Nonetheless, it was a Lyft that I was taking, and I met this beautiful woman. And as soon as I saw her to get in the car, I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're so beautiful!" And mind you, she like had a bun in her hair. You know, us women, right? She didn't think that she was in looked beautiful or gorgeous, and I was just looking, I was just like, wow, your skin is glowing and everything like that. And once I got in the car, she said thank you, but she said I don't feel beautiful. I thank you for saying this, but I've lost so much weight because I've been stressing because I recently lost my husband. My husband just passed away, right? And I'm like, kind of shocked because I just came in the car and I definitely wasn't expecting to hear that. But I do have a thing about me where people will sit down and they will tell me, you feel comfortable, thank God, whatever that is, I'm grateful for it. And yeah, she expressed that, and you can feel the hurt in her voice. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that you lost your husband. I said, how long ago did he pass away? And she said, 2 years ago. But it's so hard because she was a homemaker and he was the breadwinner of the house. And so she said it's been really tough for her. And I just was talking to her. And of course, when she said that, it automatically made me think about my husband and just honor. We had just been talking about this on the podcast. And I was just like, oh my God, we really don't know. And what she explained to me was that he just became suddenly very ill, and within that same year he passed away, right? And it wasn't something that they were expecting, to happen. So in a nutshell, that's why I say that, like if we want to take time to pause and really tune in and listen and honor the people in our lives, because we don't want to assume that the voice that you hear, you're always going to be able to, and I'm not trying to make y'all sad tonight. I'm just really stating the reality of it. And sometimes when we're in relationships and marriages for a long time and we're used to the routine and we're used to seeing each other, and the honor starts to decrease and we forget, we think that these things are we just take each other for granted. So what I'm saying is that don't take each other for granted. Don't just hear, listen, right? Don't just hear, listen, and really take in the words. Oh my gosh, Coach Joyce, love you, love you, love you, love you. Thank you for popping in, love. I absolutely adore you, right? So some people hear but don't listen. So hear with alertness, stay aware, right? Keep that honor of your life and understand, right, that God is speaking to us in so many different ways, right? And so really be alert. And we talked about the example of the 5 foolish virgins and the 5 wise virgins in the Bible, and how the 5 wise ones took the word, and didn't matter how long, right, time in between that it took for the groom to come back, but they were steadfast and they were alert and they were aware and they were prepared and they were ready, right? So we want to stay in that same way. And then we talked about some people listen, but they don't understand, right? And we talked about that to understand, it's going to take, once we kind of tune out the distraction, being able to hear and get into a space of listening, to understand, you want to get into a place of where it's like, okay, you're unassuming, right? Meaning like, don't have assumptions, don't come with your own narrative already, chiseled out like the Ten Commandments about the person who you are engaging with, right? Remain curious, remain open, and celebrate the differences and know, as I always say, I always say, I'm not an expert, God is the expert. So you just leave yourself open to figure out what new truth or new gem of wisdom will you can extrapolate from your engagement with this person. And I also told them, the participants that were on, another space you can kind of get into to get cross the bridge from listening to understanding now is also to have honor, right? It always goes back to the honor. Have honor, because I wrote in my book, 7 Stages of Loving Relationships, that you want to think about all of the steps, right? All of the actions, all of the decisions, all of the moving pieces that had to come into play and literally line up for you to have one moment of engagement with someone. Just hello. Like even that lady that I was telling you that I caught, the lift with. I didn't know I was going to meet her, but we had a genuine moment, a genuine connection. I listened to her earnestly. I felt her pain. I understood her pain, not from that angle, but I told her, my father passed away when I was like 7. And so I understand. And I shared with her my testimony that, even though he wasn't physically here with me, I can always feel his presence, because some kind of, pivot and crossing path in my life where God was like, if your father or mother was here to love you, where would they be getting that from? They would be getting it from the source, which is me. So really what you're looking for is the love, right? And if you can kind of relinquish the form that you are holding onto so dearly, then God can come and show up in so many different ways, So of course, no one will ever replace her husband. But the beauty is, and I said, some people, because she said they were married for 25 years. And I said, man, some people might never experience what you've experienced, So it's like loss is never easy to navigate. But it's better to love and have lost than never to love at all, So in that same way, keeping an open mind when you're communicating, whether it's resolving conflicts in relationships or trying to smooth out minor misunderstandings or differences, be open to, one, seek the truth, be able to drop your perspective, not come with an already pre-made assumption, and be ready to learn, right? to learn from it. So that was what we talked about then. And the last one before this one was, some people understand, but they don't accept. And the main example that I gave that night, that came to me, was just like someone who understands, when, because I'm a believer in Christ, when you tell someone about Christ and you can check the historical things that line up, they can understand all of that, and they can just say, well, I still don't accept, and still walk away, right? So to get to a place of acceptance, it takes a certain amount of humility. It does take also, on another note, I was talking to them about how in relationships sometimes we can be in a relationship where someone is either saying exactly what it is. It's that statement that I think it was Maya Angelou that stated it, where she said, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them the first time. So sometimes in relationships, the person can either be vocally voicing exactly what it is that, they either are going to do in the relationship or are not going to do. And because of whatever strong desire that, the other person has, they just won't accept it and they'll just continue on, right? So humility is seeing something for exactly what it is. And again, being able to take off your perspective and be able to even see and understand the other person's perspective. But at the end of the day, bottom line, saying, okay, but I'm seeking the truth. Right. And if you have two people coming together saying, okay, I have my angle, you have your angle, I have my emotions, you have your emotions, but we are going to seek the truth, what the bottom line is, and then we'll submit to that no matter what, right? So that's how we can get from a place of just understanding to a place of, accepting. And we have reached where we are tonight, which is that some people accept, but they don't receive. So I have laid it out long for you guys, and I hopefully gave myself enough time for people to type and answer the question for tonight. And let me repeat it for just in case there's someone new who came on and was like, okay, what's going on? Tonight's statement is that some people accept, but they don't receive. And the question that I pose tonight is, what is the difference? If somebody asks you that question, what would you tell them? And what is a tip, a gem of wisdom that you would give them if they feel like, okay, I've kind of identified that, and I need to know like what to do to cross that bridge. All right. So I think I got an answer from Emily, and thank you, Emily, for being so patient, because I think she typed this a while ago, but I was trying to give you guys the rundown. Emily says, so I think if you accept something, you are consciously taking something. But if you receive something, you just let yourself take it. Okay. So Emily says that the distinction is, if you accept it, you're consciously taking it. But if you receive it, you just take it. Okay. I like that, Emily. Thank you for, of course, typing. And absolutely. Thank you. I am Coach Joyce. Thank you, lovely. Okay, I like that, Emily. Okay. So accepting is consciously receiving something. When you receive something, you just, she said, you just let yourself take it. Meaning like you don't have to be conscious to receive something. Interesting. All right, so while I wait, just in case if there's someone, let me make sure I'm not missing someone who might be answering. Okay, all right, just want to make sure because I want to get everybody's thoughts in here. All right, so I'll do it this way. I'll present what my thoughts are on it. My thoughts are a little bit different from Emily's answer, and I will start and segue into telling you guys what I think about it by reading the statement that I came across. The statement goes like this, and you guys let me know if you agree. And this was, oh my goodness, because I always like to give people their flowers, and I don't think I wrote down the name of the website that I was on. I'm going to see if I can go back and get it. But I came across an article that was talking about the difference between accepting something and receiving. And I'm going to read the statement, and then I'm going to give you guys a list of 3 things that I feel really highlight the difference between accepting something and receiving. But let me read the statement to you guys. So the statement basically says, you can accept something on an intellectual level, but it must be received in the heart, right, as being true. So it says receive means to possess or acquire, such as a gift. And you can accept a matter and can still have a closed heart in respect, right? To applying it to one's life and walking it out in spirit and truth. And so I'm going to kind of paraphrase it because it's kind of long for you guys. Basically, in a nutshell, what that is stating is that you can accept something in your mind, right, intellectually, but to receive something, you really have to let it penetrate your heart, and you have to have an open heart. So you can accept something with an open mind, like what Emily said, kind of consciously in that way, but then still have a closed heart in regards to it. And I guess that's kind of in line with what I was talking about when people hear, about Christ and things like that, and just says, well, yeah, I accept that, but right, it takes a different heart posture to like really receive that, to truly get to a place of belief, right? So that's what I thought about that. And then the 3 things that I thought about that was different from accept, that I would state to someone the difference between accept and receive. And before I say that, I believe I am Coach Joyce just wrote something, so I want to give a moment to say that. she said, yes, because we don't let everything in our heart as true, even if we respect it. Right, right, exactly. So there are three things that I think that are different between accept and receive, right? I think the three things that I would tell someone that is very distinctly different between receiving is one, what we just said, you can accept something with your mind, but not necessarily, right? It takes, it goes through the heart when you receive something, right? So it requires you to have an open mind and an open heart to be able to get to the point of where you're saying, okay, I receive this. And two, I love what that person said in the article. I think when you receive something, you do look at it as a gift, right? Meaning like this is a gift that is coming to me that I am receiving, right? To Emily's point, when we accept things, like I'm sure there's right. We just had. I'm thinking of examples that I can use. We just had in the U.S. good old U.S. of A. Right? We just elected a new president, and it seemed to be pretty much, even though what the election showed was that it was kind of like a sweep, right? But you can kind of feel, even leading up to it, that there was like a divide. You know, there are some people who I'm sure are for President Trump right now, and there are some people who are like, oh my gosh, no, right? It is what it is now, right? So the person can accept it, even though they do not, this would not have been their choice, and it wasn't their choice, but they can accept it, that's what it is. But to receive in their heart or to agree with what the person is saying and things like that, that's a totally different thing, right? So that's a simple example in that way, right? So we have, when you receive, you're not just opening your mind, right, to accept what the person is saying, but you're open in your mind and your heart, right? So it's now going from a process of mental kind of, as I like to say, gymnastics, a delineation in your mind or critical thinking, however you want to put it in articulate it in words, to where now this thing is now trickling down to the heart space, right? This thing that is coming to you is now getting into the heart space to where you can receive it. And two, receiving is a gift, right? You possess something, you receive it as a gift. And I think thirdly is something that I also read in this article that I 100% agree with, is that I think when you receive something, there's a part, it requires your faith to receive it. It requires, and of course in that context, in the article they were talking, it is, just to put that out there, it was a Christian like blog. So definitely the article was mainly about believing in Christ and things like that. But even if you take it out of the context of that and you put it in the context of like relationships and marriage, I have, I've not just seen people, I definitely have gone through the experience myself where, let's just say you have a wife that accepts a husband's hand in marriage, right? He asks her to marry him. She accepts it. You can accept it, but then get into a space for whatever reason. For me, I know the experience that I had to go through because I didn't grow up with my dad. I did have, thankfully, male angels, with masculine energy in my life, but not in the household for me to see the dynamic of a husband and wife going, working together, or what it looks like for a man to want to protect, the family and provide. And so all of that, it was a big learning curve for me, right? For me to learn that when I got married to my husband, So in that same sense, you can have a wife where she'll accept it, right? Yes, my answer is yes, I'll be your wife. But then when it comes to now functioning in the marriage, she might not want to receive the protection or the wisdom and course correction and all kind of things, how, right, the umbrella of what providing and protecting is for that husband, right? So that's an example of that. And it can go the other way around too, right? Where that man who meets a woman who he feels like, okay, this woman is the person that I would like to be my wife, to walk by my side in a lifetime, he can accept and take her hand. But now when it comes to the point that, okay, this woman is now providing, right, wisdom to him, is now wanting to, he might not want to incorporate her into making decisions and things like that, right? So there's a portion of it that he's accepting, but he's not receiving. It's almost like you have a gift, but you don't utilize that gift, and you don't utilize it because there's a portion of it, right? Either maybe because maybe it was like me, initially, and lack of understanding or not being able to see what that looks like experientially. So now you have to kind of learn as you go, and then God has to teach the person how to receive the gift that he has given them. Right. So that's on that level. So let me know what your thoughts are. Hey, Plano, my goodness, it's been a while. How are you? How are you? We are talking about some people accept but don't receive tonight. And the question that I asked everyone on here is, what is the difference? And let me take some time. I think Coach Joyce wrote something else. She says, yes, there are things I refuse to accept because of my beliefs. Right. So what do you guys think in regards to the three things that I stated that's different between accepting something and receiving? And another thing that I thought of too, that I know I have definitely have experienced and had to come to the understanding, is that sometimes there were certain things that happened to me in my life, and then I would accept them. It's like, okay, I'm not, trying to, and if anybody has studied like psychology and things like that, if you have, especially if you are a person who has experienced any childhood trauma, there are certain people who can kind of like just blanket all. It's like just completely, just for their own survival and protection, they literally will block all of it out, and I've had experiences where with people who have done that, right? And then they come to a certain age and they're like, oh my gosh, but it was a way of them protecting themselves. And then there are other people who are like who I was, I wasn't and it's not like I did it intentionally. I don't know, maybe just the fabric of how I made, I didn't block it out. I wanted to take it in. I wanted to see exactly for what it was. So I had a lot of acceptance of things that occurred, or happened to me. I could see it for what it is and accept the truth. But what I did realize is, as I got, matured and was older, part of my protection was, my dad or people aren't here to really protect me. So I am going to have to set up in my mind my own little, guard my heart mechanism to make sure that I protect myself. And what I realized once, I started my forever friendship with Ben, right? Just early on, even in our friendship, and definitely when we became husband and wife, even more of that healing, and maturing came into place, where that guard was up so high. I wrote in my book that I built like the wall of China, the Great Wall of China around my heart, just because I didn't want, people, specifically men, to hurt me. And I wrote in the book, I was flabbergasted at Ben, because if it seemed like the wall was non-existent when it came to him, and it just seemed like he was able to get in the same space and place where I was, and I wrote in the book, it's because the same secret place that I was, where I placed myself up, metaphorically, I placed my heart in the secret place in the garden where God, in my own heart, I felt like he was, because my favorite verse in the Bible is Psalm 91, where it says, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." So I took that. My grandmother used to make me read it 12 p.m., 6 p.m. every day. So it worked. It penetrated me. And so the great wall that I built up was like, okay, I'm over here. And I didn't know or even take into consideration that, okay, Charlie, you're not the only one, who's in that secret place. You're not the only one who knows that. And when I met Ben, he definitely, right, his passion for God, his, wanting to, God to transform him and make him into the man that he is today. And in the same way, right, for the same reasonings, I was doing it as a little girl. He was doing it as a young man, because whoever, whether it was his father not being there or someone not being able to teach him, right, how manhood looks, or a man of God, how walking this earth looks. So we were thinking on the same plane. And so I was looking like, how you got, how'd you get past the wall, right, without my permission? How'd you do that, right? And that was because he was already, right, he was already trying to love, understand, discover, and have God guide him in the same way that I did. And I realized, even in our friendship, the beauty of meeting someone who is in alignment with, the core truth, and trying to find, and learn more about themselves, in God, that I built up this wall so much, wanting to protect myself from predators on the outside, that it also built up a wall that was imprisoning myself, and, potentially also guarding myself from receiving people who God sent to me, So it's like, when in the relationship with Ben, that's the thing that I found out, I was like, man, I was good at guarding myself for, at least in my mind, right? Because really, who's protecting me? Really, God, right? It's not nothing I'm doing in my mind. But I was thinking, okay, I was really good at guarding myself, but now what do I do when this person who's in my space is not a predator? They're for me. They want to love me wholeheartedly. But I had issues on learning how to receive that love, right? Because now I have to change my whole perspective. I can't, one, I have to really take in love, and love is not defensive. So I've lived, defensively, rightfully so, right? Because it's like a young, pretty girl. You don't want, I gotta stay alert, because the wolves are out there, and I don't have anybody else, in to protect me in that way. So, but what do I do now when this person, he's not a wolf in sheep clothing. He is most definitely there for me, and I have to learn how to receive him now, right? I have to go beyond just accepting. Like I'm very sharp in my mind. I absorb things really quickly, so I can just, you know, articulate things and understand arguments and things like that. But no, this takes a different part of me. It has to ignite a different part of me to be able to actually see this person as a gift and receive. And it's going to require my faith to receive, because I can't receive without trusting this individual to be able to enter the heart space, right? So the things that we've been talking about, some people hear but they don't listen. Some people listen but they don't understand. Some people understand but don't accept. The hear, the listen, right? And the understand and the accept is all kind of right in the mental space, in the mental plane. Now what we're talking about tonight, when we get from some people accept but don't receive, is now we're dealing with the heart, the emotional plane, and that's a very sacred place for many of us, and so that's why I think those three things for me is what is distinctively different between someone just accepting something versus receiving it, right? Which is that you have to have an open mind and an open heart. You have to understand that whatever it is that you're receiving, that for you to possess it, it is a gift, right? And then three, it requires your faith. Your faith is what allows you to receive it, right? My mind, it doesn't necessarily have to require my faith for me to accept something for what it is. Going back to the example that I said, a lot of people dislike the current president of the United States, but it is what it is. You accept it. Like I was just having the thought the other day because and of course, it's what we love about America, right? That you can come and you can have free speech and you can say what it is that you can say. But I don't know if anybody else feels like this, but it's been kind of like, at least in my opinion, a little ridiculous and can kind of work against the success of our country and our nation because, of course, there are people who don't like what he's doing, including all the way up, right, to elected officials and things like that. Like, I don't know if you guys saw the speech that he did where you had like the Democrats holding up signs and talking about Elon stealing money and all kind of, it's just, I'm just, and I get it. You know what I mean? I get it. And I understand you want officials to stand up against things that they think are wrong, right? But there's a way to do it. And I think to work against ourselves in that way, like no matter what the leader is, you want to pray for the success of that leader because this is the country that you live in. You know what I mean? So it's like you work against yourself, and I just bring it down to and listen, I try not to get political on here. In no way am I trying to turn this into a political discussion, but I'm just using it as an example because we can still take that same example that I'm talking about, whereas if you're a person that's living in this country and wanting the leader of the country to fail, how it works against yourself, right? And it works against the country that you live in. You can put it in the context of a relationship. And I always tell the couples that I deal with is like, you don't want to seek to be right. If you feel like you won an argument against your spouse, you really lost, right? Because you're supposed to be developing a relationship where you can work together and become one, essentially. So in no way do I ever feel like if I'm right or I won something against Ben, did I ever win anything, right? And I on my private group coaching, I read them a quote. I believe it's by, I want to say Napoleon Hill, but it's not. I'm wrong. It's not Napoleon Hill. And I will let you guys know who it's from. I think is it? Let me not say it because I was going to say another name. And I'm like, Charlotte, no, you're going to say the wrong thing. But basically, the quote states that, if you win an argument, you lose, if you lose it, you can't. No, it said you can't win an argument because if you lose an argument, you lose it. And if you win an argument, you lose it. And basically, it's the same point. And I read another quote by Jordan Peterson. I do remember who this one is by. And he said, basically, that people who want to be right are the worst because the whole point of an argument is to not have a winner, but to find the truth. Right. And so along the lines exactly of what I was just stating in regards to whether it's President Trump and how people are hoping and talking and hoping his demise as if it doesn't affect the country that you live in, right? You should want to pray. It doesn't matter who the leader is. You should want to pray for God's guidance for them so that the country that you live in can thrive, right? In that same way, in the relationship that you have, your spouse is not your enemy, even if there is a major conflict that you guys are trying to navigate through or having challenges in. It's always us against it, it's never us being against each other. So when we think and we remember that person and we receive that person as a gift, and can go beyond accepting in the moment, like, okay, that's your perspective, that's what you believe, this is my perspective, that's what I believe, and get into the truth of the matter that this person, if it is the truth of the matter, and you really do believe that God divinely sent that person to you, that let me receive you as the gift that you are to me, right? Let me go beyond and do that. And if I can do that, then I can now leave space to where the truth, the resounding truth, can come in, and we can both kind of, navigate this situation being fueled by the truth rather than our emotions or our assumptions or our singular perspectives, So that's what I believe the difference is between receiving and accepting something. So I do agree with Emily. It is something, when you accept something, you do consciously, accept it. But again, you can accept something and still not receive it, right? You can have an open mind towards accepting something being what it is. But when we're talking about receiving, it's now, trickling down into the heart space, right? And we're talking about, really things that, shift us. And I know maybe someone's listening to us like, okay, well, maybe somebody just gives you, a kind act, and maybe it's not that serious, Charlotte. Maybe it doesn't always have to be in the heart space if somebody just, well, I would say to that person, again, it depends on the heart posture of the person who is actually receiving that gift, right? There are people who give certain things, from very micro things to like a smile, a hug, a card. And there are people, depending on what positioning they're in, their outlook on life, their mindset, their heart posture towards things, and they're just like, I accept, and it's like it's nothing, right? And then there are other people that you give it to, and they have the mindset of, okay, I'm going to receive this kind gesture. I'm going to receive it. It's going to touch my heart. I'm going to take this. The whole process of the statement that I've been going over is, okay, how do we get from being distracted by the noise of the world to where we're, okay, not letting the noise of the world drown out our internal, right? What's the word I'm looking for? Like our intuition, or our, those essential kind of like thoughts and things that come that are really important. We don't let the world and the things that are going on drown that out. So how do we just get from like letting the distraction get to us to now, okay, we can clear out the noise so that our mind can kind of have a moment to take certain things in and process it and get to a place of understanding, to now how can we get from there to now, okay, now it's going into our heart space, right? Because the whole, at least for me, the reason why I came up with the statement is, how do we get to that process? Because it's very easy to walk through this life not really being awakened or aware, and not lead from the spaces that are really important and very essential, especially when the world starts to tell you so much that if you lead with your heart, you are going to be led astray. It's almost like it's the devil's tactic for the things that are really the things that will give you and anchor you and give you a good footing in life. Let me downplay that, so that people can just remain tactical, and calculative, and only experience life in a certain way, but never really like hitting the real mark of what most of us really want, which is true connection, true love, a deep sense of purpose. And you don't get, it's very hard to get there staying in just the mental plane without having, right? Something moving on your heart, something moving in your spirit, something that's going to fuel you, that's going to require your faith to continue on when everything in you is saying stop already. There's no use to you doing this. What is the purpose? You know? So that's the whole reason why I wanted to introduce it to you guys. So Emily says, also, when you accept something, you don't have to like it. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this part is, as I said, really special to me because it experientially I've had to really go through and work on this part because if there's anybody who's on here who has been through something similar, where you feel maybe you didn't have the people who were there, like for most of us, it's our parents, right? Who show us that first, understanding of, expressing, showing, displaying, and receiving love. And for me, because that wasn't there, God, I put God in the place, he became my mother and my father in that sense. And so it, I had to learn to be able to really truly receive authentic, true, like impactful love. One, you can't be on guard and you don't live on the defense to try to experience that because I say it all the time here on my show that God is love and there's no opposite of that. A lot of people say the opposite of love is hating, but there's no opposite of love because there is no other force that is like greater or equivalent to it, so when you really get into a space of really experiencing love and really having it, you start to notice your defenses start to drop. One, because you realize not much you can do to really defend yourself better than love can, better than God can, right? And then, as I said before, when I was young, me thinking being calculative or me guarding my heart, I really wasn't. It was God's protection all along, right? So when you come to that understanding, you're less defensive, because love is offensive. It's not defensive, right? And so once you get to that place, the thing that I realized that when it's not offensive, it's because my faith is like, I'm anchored in my faith, and my faith is causing me to be able to kind of go through life knowing that I can't lose. Like I'm God's child, I can't lose. And also, and I thought about this in presented, knowing that I was going to present it to you guys, because I always try to jump out of my perspective and think about maybe possibly someone who might get on the show and have a certain mentality. And I thought about someone coming across the episode and saying, well, Charlotte, what about the things that in life that are hard to accept, man? Right? Like there's so many things that are hard to accept when especially when evil things happen, bad things happen. And right, that's usually, at least for me, I know for me, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to learn how to protect myself, because of those things. And when, the thought that came to me is that the things that happen in life, there are certain things that, yeah, we will have to accept even without us having the full understanding of why those negative things happen. And I can say in totality, just looking, whether it was the things that happened to me experientially that I did not, feel like, okay, yeah, this didn't, in that moment, this didn't need to happen to me. Why would God allow it? Or looking out into the world or close family members or friends and seeing things that occur that is like, okay, oh my gosh, well, why? Why does this need to happen? And what I've noticed with all of those things is that those challenges or those negative things that happen always seem to trigger an awakening within us, as a people. And I'm not saying it happens to everyone because everyone's different, right? And some people do glean more to negative things, but overarching, you see when things happen, that are negative, that you start to see people riling up together, wanting to, whether it's to fight against injustice or things like that. It's never a negative action that doesn't have like a response where people are now shaken up, right? It's almost like it shakes up and wakes us up so that we're not just caught kind of in flatlined in the regular routine of life. And it reminds us of how fragile life is, and then we start to think about things that really do matter. So that's the good that comes out of it. And the truth is that I do know that no matter what negative thing occurs, there's always a gem, a seed that you can extract from it. It always is, it just, you just have to be, a person who says, okay, I'm going to look for it. I'm going to search for it, even if I don't understand fully. And I would say to that person too, if there's a person who comes across, maybe not on right now, but maybe looks at this later, is that when you think about that, and you think about that thought, well, what about the things that do happen that are bad? And I just have to accept that. If you just stay there, it's not going to help anything, right? But if you get into a mentality of saying, okay, yeah, there are things in life that do happen that I probably will not understand, but I will have to accept it even without my understanding. And even with me accepting that, I can still choose to live life and still receive and acknowledge the gifts, whether those gifts are the people that God has brought into my life, or that gift is the grace of the fact that I'm provided for and protected every single day. I have prayers pretty much every night with my children, and one of the reoccurring prayers that we thank God for is the fact that we don't live, in a region of the world where there's imminent threat right now, right? Where war is at our front door. I can send my kids outside and I don't have to feel immediate threat, that they're going to be harmed, right? So just not taking those things that are really not little things, they really are very essential, meaningful, impactful things, not taking those things for granted and looking at those things as gifts. I write in my book, 7 Stages of Loving Relationships, that, you know, when miracles happen, in life, people are like in awe of them. And one of the reasons why maybe miracles don't happen so often is that maybe we're not acknowledging the miracles that are going on every single day. Like the fact that you have a heartbeat that you can't control that is beating every single day. You know what I mean? Your life, everything that you do here is based on a heartbeat that you cannot control. And I get it. Maybe there's some people on here who's like, okay, I can slow down my heartbeat. I can hold my, whatever tactics you're thinking of. The fact is that every single thing that you can think about, that you will acknowledge that you will do, is based on a heartbeat that you can't control, which means your life is being supported and sustained. And that's miraculous, you know? So I think if we acknowledge those things as miracles more often, if we acknowledge, your husband, your wife, your partner as the gift that they are, then you can, one, experience love more authentically. And then it also provides an environment in the relationship where beautiful, wonderful experiences, things can occur, lessons that you both can learn together. And you will set up a foundation and environment where when the challenges of life come, because you have allowed certain fundamental truths about life to get into your heart space, and you've been living like that, then the challenges that you weather them together and they don't have such a sting on you. They don't hold you bound. Um, yeah, by them. So so that's definitely what I would say to someone. And I do think there's a difference between just accepting something from receiving. I can literally go back to many different conversations, and I'm grateful for my marriage because it has grown me in such a way, because I literally had to pay attention to myself to see, like, if Ben would say something to me, whether I'm just accepting it, and then, I'm not really letting it get to the heart space. I'm not really receiving it, and it makes no sense in life if God has gifted you with people in your life to not see them as gifts and not utilize it. I always tell my clients, if there's something in that's going on, in their marriage, and they're not, different intimacy tools that we have, whether it's deep conversations and intimate conversations or just moments of, hugs, embraces, back rubs, whatever it is. It's like getting your license, having a car, and leaving that car in the, you know, in your driveway or, you know, and not using it, having a license to drive and not driving. That's what you're doing if you don't acknowledge the gifts that are presented to you in your life. You're leaving the car in the garage and leaving the key on the hook, even though you have been given the license to be able to go out and drive. And so I think in the same sense, if you ask yourself, if you had your license and you had a car and you had keys, would you just leave it in the garage and not drive at all? No, because God is giving you the right of way to go ahead, go explore the road. That's the same thing in our relationships when we accept something to a certain degree, but then we don't receive it fully. That's what we're doing. So if you are a husband that met this wonderful woman who you said, I am going to make this woman my wife, not my life. Don't make her your life now. That won't work. But my wife, right? Knowing that two is better than one, knowing that the merger of your understanding and her understanding and the way God can flow through both of you will make a greater picture. Accept her, bring her into your life, but then block her and whatever wisdom that God flows through her and not want to come together and create the vision for your life, and you know what I mean? And only let her in certain aspects and not in totality. That's what that's what you would be doing, right? Is accepting but not receiving totally, right? I accept you to come into my life, but I am not going to let you function in totality the way that you're supposed to function. And therefore, I'm refusing a part of the gift that God has given me. And vice versa. If you're a wife and you've taken, you want to, especially as a woman, we receive. We're our anatomy, the way God built us is literally to receive. That is one of the like major, I think, powers of a woman is her ability to receive, and just literally the way that God made us is supposed to be a constant inspiration and reflection of a heart posturing and a positioning that is easily like receive. You're able to receive easily. You're supposed to be able to receive easily from God, which then allows the people who are in your space, in your environment, to kind of like course correct because of it. So yeah, we want to not just accept but receive. And the way you can kind of, I would say, a tip to be able to kind of assess yourself and have an awareness of that is, okay, when you're accepting. I just said it's like more on the mental plane, as Emily said, you consciously accept it, but you can accept something intellectually, you can consciously accept something, but it not penetrate and go to the heart. Your heart can still be closed. So literally you can practice it by, if someone's talking to you, you know, you know when, okay, yeah, my mind can be open to that, but I'm not receiving that in my heart. And like Coach Joyce, who was on here, not everything you're supposed to receive in that way, right? So that's okay, when you know that. But let me tell you this, that's something that I learned, because again, when I let love really fully come in, I was no longer on the defense. And every time, right? Because this is a day-to-day walk, right? Day by day. So I have to be course corrected. God be like, oh, Charlotte, you get on the defense now. You're trying to prove your case and make, win your argument. And that's not what we do, right? And so when I'm course corrected, you literally feel the peace. So even when you are, detecting and discernful in knowing that, okay, this person who I'm talking to is not giving me gems of wisdom or gems of truth, you still don't want to stay in the mental plane to do that, right? You have to use your heart, your spirit, to be able to discern, because in that engagement, right? If you just stay in the mental and say, okay, oh, I see you, I'm not going to let you, and you get on the defense, like, okay, I don't want you to impact me in that way. And of course, right, this takes an understanding and awareness of your maturity, because it takes time, right? We're going through these stages. Some people hear, but they don't listen. Some people listen, but they don't understand. Some people understand, but they don't accept. I put it in those stair steps for a reason, because it is a process, right? So I'm not saying don't assess yourself and don't be aware that where you are in the real time, and have humility and say, okay, well, I'm not there yet, Charla. So I got to stay over here in this space so that, I'm okay and I'm protected. That's fine. What I'm saying though is to grow and to get to the next part, you will know if you're in the space and maturity to know that I'm not going to use only my mental to be able to discern this person. It's going to require my heart. It's going to require my spirit, right? And once you know that, you leave yourself in a space, because sometimes God will have something for you to say to that person, right? Or some kind of experience, or maybe something for you to even learn from. People have conversations with people who have completely different beliefs from them, but it could be a conversation that you were sent to have, because it will give you a great understanding, even though you don't believe the same things, right? And it's the awareness that God can speak through anyone at any time, right? So again, kind of pushing aside your assumptions and allowing, right, God to lead in the things, the resources. These are the tools that God has given us to navigate this life in the best way, to have the most optimal, loving experiences here. And so hopefully you guys, enjoyed it. Number one, to heard something that you can apply in it. All right, so I'm gonna sum it up. And oh my goodness, hi Eliana, hi Justin. I've been on for a while, but going to hop off now. But I still thank you guys for popping, and I appreciate it. But let me just summarize for you guys while before I jump off. So again, we are talking about tonight. Some people accept but don't receive. And the question I asked is, what is the difference between accepting and receiving? And I put out 3 distinctive differences that I feel distinguish when you accept something versus when you receive something. And so 3 things that sets apart receiving is, 1, to receive something, you have to have an open mind and an open heart, right? It has to be able to hit the heart space. There's a quote that I love, and is it from Mother Teresa? I don't think it's from Mother Teresa, but it's a quote where it says, "Kindness is a universal language that the blind can see and the deaf can hear." I love that, and that just means, right, when somebody does a genuine kind act, it just stirs the soul. It doesn't matter who it is, right? You feel it. It goes to your heart, to your soul, and that's the idea, right? The fact that when you receive, your mind is open as well as your heart. Number two, when you receive, you are taking something to possess it, and you acknowledge that it's a gift, right? You can accept something and it's not a gift. Like I said, a lot of people are accepting that Trump is president right now, but they do not see him as a gift, right? Where'd the accent come from, y'all? I'm sorry. Right? They don't see him as a gift. A lot of people. Some other people do see him as a gift and exactly what they prayed for, right? So to receive means that you are seeing and you're receiving it as a gift and something that you're possessing. So number three, lastly, but definitely not least important, is that in order to receive, it's your faith, activates your ability to receive it, right? Because again, it's coming into our heart space, not just staying in the mental plane anymore, right? So the things that we receive, it is, right, being filtered in a more deep, in a more, having more depth to it in the way that you're processing it and the way that you are taking it in. So those are the three things, okay? So to receive, you have to have an open heart and an open mind. You have to acknowledge and receive it as a gift. And thirdly, it requires your faith. Your the whole ability for you to receive it is through your faith, right? Because again, if it's coming into the sacred heart space, it's going to require us to trust if we're going to really receive what somebody is giving us as a gift. And there's no activation of faith without trust, right? It's literally believing in the things that you can't see, right? So that I would say those are the three things that I would tell somebody if they wanted to understand the difference between accepting something and receiving. And I would say if you are a person who came across the podcast tonight and you want to exercise it, definitely a safe way to exercise this is acknowledge the people and identify the people in your life who are people who have, poured into you positively, impacted you in a certain way. And when you are engaging with them, be very fully present and aware in yourself of what they're giving to you if it's just staying up here in the mental plane, or if you're actually getting to a space where it's like, okay, whoa, no, I'm really receiving this. It's doing something different, you know, to me. I'm not just accepting it and then kind of like, and it reminds me of there's a parable in the parable of the sower in the Bible, and it talks about what happens to people when they hear the truth in God's word, and all different ways of how it can be kind of just taken away, disregarded by the person. And the thing that the example that comes up to me is when you just kind of accept certain things, you can be like the seed. There's a seed that basically is, it falls on the ground, but it gets basically choked. Basically choked by the cares of the world. And so I think of this in this way, is that sometimes when things come to us, especially if we're having conversations where people are presenting things to us that we might not have thought of, whether we want to say it's blind spots, our own blind spots, or just new wisdom, or new truth to us, it's going to take, not allowing the assumptions that we've had, or the narratives that we've created, or the things that we thought were true. That new seed is going to have to combat that, so I kind of liken it to the cares of the world. Because for sure, for me, I know in my process of getting, truth and receiving God's wisdom, a lot of times it is so the opposite of what is kind of put out into the world. And for many people, they become resistant of it because they think if they choose to kind of take on that mentality that they will leave themselves kind of open and vulnerable for people to just hurt them and do all kind of things, and like they'll just be a doormat for people to walk over, when it's actually the opposite, one example that I can use is just vulnerability, right? You look it up in the dictionary, and it talks about someone who is leaving themselves open for harm. So who would want to ever do that, But when you look and dive in deeper, you realize that the vulnerability is such a strength, because it's like you can't get to a space of even being in your authentic self without being vulnerable, or having deep connection with people without being vulnerable, and it's actually a great strength, but that's one of those things, right? So if you're a person who's used to protecting yourself and you've been on the defense to try to protect yourself from people who are harming you, somebody coming up to you and saying you have to be vulnerable, or someone like me, where I wrote my book and I said, well, vulnerability is really a process that is for God first, you second, and then third, the people who are around you in your circle get to benefit from somebody who's really walking in their truth and authenticity, because there's so many people who struggle with it that aren't, right? But it's not this thing where it's like, okay, what do I have to say? What am I going to expose myself? What is going to be said? No, it's actually a process where you expose yourself to God and he shows you who you really are, right? And so whatever the embarrassment, whatever the shame, whatever the fears, all of those things that are just elusive shadows, when you put the light of God's love, then it disperses. And then you can be like, oh, I can breathe. I didn't realize these things were on my neck. you know, I can breathe now. I can be who I really am. And then people see the light and they, it's like a magnet. They're attracted to it. And then, they just get blessed from it. So really, you exposing to the other person, that is just an after effect of what the real true process is. But oftentimes when people think about vulnerability, that's the first thing they go to, is like, oh, what am I gonna have to say? Or expose, no, that's I'm sure in the process that's a facet of it, but it's not the core element of what true vulnerability is, By the time I've gotten there has been so much that has already been working inside of me to be able to, tell you my story, because I know I'm not my story. So much has occurred before that. So, I just want to encourage you guys tonight, so that's a way you can kind of test it. Identify those people in your life, that are your, as I like to call it, when I coach my clients, it's like, who are your starting five? Your starting five, those people in your life that you speak to them, they give you energy, they impact you in a good way. Start there. You know what I mean? That's a safe place to start, because we can have our starting five and we can have the people who impact us in our life and still just accept and not receive them. That's the whole reasoning why I wanted to kind of, well, not the whole reasoning, but one of the main reasons why I wanted to present this to you tonight, because we rob ourselves of, authentic connection and real experiencing optimal experiences of love when we just accept instead of receive something that we're supposed to take in and give it a moment. It reminds me of a moment where one of my concerts, and I was on stage, and I remember telling the people that I just wanted, can you give me a moment, because I just want to take this in, because I had been busting my behind, in the dark, busting my behind, practicing for hours and hours and hours. And I could feel myself, anybody who's a performer who has, you get the nerve, well, at least I do, you get the nerves and you're just wanting to do your best. And sometimes you can kind of, in that season, I was performing a lot. So concert after concert, and I just was like, oh wait, no, I got to take this moment, because this is the little girl who was, battling stage fright, and I worked my way through it. And, here I am, right? Like, building my way up and in front of audiences that I didn't think I would probably ever be in front of. And so I just kind of took a moment in literally within the concert to just say, okay, no, I just need to take a moment to just take this in and really receive how far I've come and where I am. And so that's what I'm asking you to do tonight. You know, wherever you are, it could be on your bed. After you get off with me, just take a moment to pause and really receive and be thankful. And like I said, honor the miracle of your life. And you'll start to see, you know, you'll open yourself up to greater experiences. Not just with, if you're someone who's married and listening or in a long-term relationship, you'll set an environment where you will be pleasantly surprised the experiences that you can share with each other because of it. Choosing to say, okay, no, I'm not just going to accept, no, I'm going to fully receive what you're saying because I know, you know, who you're sent by. And yeah, so that's it. Absolutely love you guys for whoever came on with me tonight, which was a couple of folks. I appreciate you guys. I didn't get to say hi to all of you, but I appreciate you, Emily, as always. Justin, Eliana, Lion of Yehuda, Plano. It's Dream. I'm sorry if I'm missing people, folks. I appreciate you guys. You know, I always tell you, you can be anywhere. So when you take a moment to give me your precious currency of your time, your energy, and your faith, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. If you liked anything you heard, definitely subscribe to my Forever Friends Academy YouTube channel. Like, comment, spread, share if you feel like people can benefit from this content. So I appreciate you guys. I will be back on, God willing, Sunday to talk to you guys. And we're almost finished. I think we only got like 2 more statements from this, you know, series, expansive conversation we've been having. So we're almost done. Thank you for sticking in here with me. I hope you are getting, you know, something, you know, out of it that is applicable, that you can apply to your relationships and your life overall. So I'm going to bid you guys adieu tonight. All right. And always remember to live, to love freely. Until next time, I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.